We're in kind of the Eastern religions. Buddhism will be our topic tonight. Interesting. Well, let's just jump in. Buddha. What is Buddha? Literally, it's a Sanskrit word that literal meaning is enlightened one. And obviously the religion is named after this, Buddha. We think about it, we usually think about a particular person who is the Buddha, or at least the big pot-bellied figurines around. I don't know what it is. Apparently that's stylish. Yeah. So we're going to talk about Buddha under this particular category of ultimate concern, which if you remember we said is kind of like the God of the religion. The unique thing about Buddhism is there are no gods in Buddhism. There's not a God or a group of gods. There's not in any sort of way we would imagine as a religion, they worship some deity. However, there is this fellow who we know of as the first Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama. You've all heard of him, right? I put here, the Buddha. He's the founder of this religion. A little bit about him. And I say there are no gods in Buddhism, but I have a picture of the Buddhist temple that's like just in Homestead and the inside, and you'll see there are statues and all that sort of thing. So even though in a typical way of worship, we think there's no gods, there's certainly a lot of devotion paid to the Buddha. A little bit about his life. He was born in what would be modern day Nepal, somewhere between the 4th and the 6th century, or 6th and 4th century BC. So we're going pretty far back, 3 to 500, or is it 4 to 600? I don't know. That whole centuries versus hundreds of years throws me, especially when you go backwards. He was a real life person, though there is much debate about his actual date. So, and because of that, because of this particular religion, he's rather mythical figure. There's some things we know about him. There are other things that kind of have blown up in myth. One thing we do know about him is he was born into a very wealthy family, but his mother died when he was 7 days old. So when we get into Buddhism and the particulars of the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, which I don't know if we'll make it to tonight, you're going to hear a lot about suffering and escaping suffering. So what happens 7 days into his life that affects the rest of his life? The death of his mother. And so this is something that will shape who he is and the kind of faith that comes out of his experience. In fact, what happened to him from that point on is his family, grandparents primarily, wanted to isolate him as much as possible and keep him away from that knowledge and any sort of suffering or grief that would come from that. So you can see how this would affect a fellow. And it did. He did grow up, get married, had a son. He was serving his family. He was doing his thing. And then one day he just decided, I'm done, and left. Like he didn't, he was a father, he was a husband. And then he just decided this isn't for me, which is kind of a weird thing. And so he left his family, he gave his wealth away, and he became, I guess you'd say, a loner, a monk, a mystic, an ascetic. He goes off by himself, and there's a particular legend that he sat under a Bodhi tree, B-O-D-H-I, B-O-D-Y, different thing, a Bodhi tree, and he fasted for 3 days, and after 3 days of fasting and meditation, he came to full enlightenment. Oh, the heavens opened or something. And he understood in that moment all of the mysteries of life. He was one with the cosmos, with the world, whatever. And so it's interesting to me because we would think, from a Christian perspective, family, responsibility, that's pretty important. We value those things, but his story is, I don't know if he tried it and he realized, because is it fair to say in our relationships, we experience most of our pain and suffering? No offense to any married couples here. My wife's out online, so I can say whatever I want. But our closest relationships often cause us the most pain and the most difficulty. And maybe that was part of it. He's like, his whole bent is avoiding suffering, getting rid of suffering. And so in this moment of enlightenment under this body tree, he comes to understand what it means to be rid of suffering and to have true inner peace. And that is the beginning of what will become the Buddhist philosophy. He died at about the age of 80. He was meditating, but the real cause of death is thought to be he ate some bad food. Not here, of course. And so his dying message to his followers was that everything in life is temporary. He's a very hopeful guy, right? Life is short, eat dessert first, kind of a fellow. And so for about 40 years of his life, from the time he left his family until his death, that was his very much a monastic type life, spent in meditation, spent in trying to attain enlightenment until he finally did, and then he passes away. And he had obviously spent some time sharing his teachings. One of the things that he has considered, here's a fun word for you, is a bodhisattva, B-O-D-H-I. So the body tree is part of this, S-A-T-T-V-A. This is a person that becomes enlightened, but rather than become one with the universe and enter nirvana or whatever you want to call it, decides to remain on earth to help other people gain enlightenment. And so this was his task. This is what he decided. When he gained enlightenment under the tree, he decided rather than to be absorbed into the universe or to experience nirvana, which is the end goal of all Buddhist philosophy and teaching, he would stick around and share what he knew with others. And so during those 40 years is when he shared his various teachings, his various ideas, and started what we know of as Buddhism. It's an interesting origin story. What's next? There are three main, well, I guess we'd say branches of Buddhism. You see modern day Nepal is here. I don't know if you can see them, but the oldest is called Theravada. It's the red. No, that's orange. So Burma, Laos, Thailand, Cambodia, Sri Lanka. The next one is Mahayana, is the yellow. You can see it, and then Vajrayana, also known as Tibetan Buddhism, is the third version. A little bit of difference between them. Theravada Buddhism is a very much a this world kind of Buddhist philosophy, but it's all about the monks. So when we talk about the local chapter in Homestead a little bit later, that is a Theravada Buddhist place. So when you go in there, and the picture I found is a bunch of monks with their red robes lined up across the top. It's very much a monastic focus. In this version of Buddhism, you have to be a monk. Actually, most of them, but this one particularly, only monks are eligible for nirvana. If you're not a monk, too bad, so sad. Maybe next life. If you do enough good in this life, you'll be reincarnated and maybe you'll get all the way up to monk. Now, it's not quite as much the caste system as Hinduism when we talked about it, but there's a lot of similarity. Notice, by the way, where it's not. India. He's kind of, the language is the same. Words like dharma, words like karma, words like samsara cycle, all of these are shared between these two religions. But India is Hindu primarily, and then we see the Buddhist influence there. Interesting that there's a lot of overlaps, but not, what would we say, geographical overlap. So Theravada Buddhism is the red. The oldest, and it's the one that emphasizes the monk life. Mahayana, which is the yellow, is this is where that bodhisattva idea, this reincarnation, it believes that after Buddha went away, there are continuing to be these kind of bodhisattvas that come and forego nirvana to help others, and that the Buddha has been reincarnated an infinite number of times, and you have to find that. This is one that typically you're going to try to find your guru, your monk, your mentor to teach you about it. And hopefully, if you're lucky, your guru, mentor, monk will be the latest incarnation of Buddha. The Tibetan Buddhism, or the Vajrayana Buddhism, is the one that's the Dalai Lama version. So Tibet, Mongolia, Inner Mongolia, this is the one that you know of. You've heard of the Dalai Lama. It is much more mystical, much more, mystical is the right word. If Theravada is practical, this one, Tibetan Buddhism, is very mystical. And if you've ever heard the Dalai Lama speak or read some of his things, you can see that in what he said. And so these three branches of Buddhism came out, and they all share some of the same teachings of this guy who sat down under a tree after he abandoned his family and realized, oh, everything is going to be all right. And he was enlightened. So to me, I didn't know if like that part about he abandoned his family, I didn't feel that. But that's what really struck me. I don't know why. I'm like, this doesn't seem like the kind of guy I want to follow. Like, that doesn't seem very enlightened to me. It seems very selfish. And if you think about Buddhism in general, a lot of it is very inward. A lot of it has to, if you're a monk, you're living your life, you're not connected. You want to abandon any connections to this world and this life and other people. That's part of the best way to get enlightened is to not be burdened with all you folks. So think about what's one of the hallmarks of the Christian movement. We're a community. We need each other. We're interconnected. We rely on each other. We don't abandon and pull away. We understand the value of that. And so that is kind of big picture who he is and the religion he started. So let's talk about their sacred writings. We have the Tripitaka, which is fun to say. The Tripitaka, it literally means three baskets or triple baskets. We had the Trimurti in Hinduism, that Trinitarian idea we have here of the gods. Here we have the Trinitarian writings. These three baskets of writings that are the sacred writings of Buddhism. The first one is Vinaya, which is the basket of discipline. These are the rules for monks and nuns. And by the way, Buddhism is an equal opportunity enlightenment religion, though the rules for nuns or female monks are a little stricter than male monks. Still, they welcome women to achieve enlightenment. I think you'd be relieved since there's more ladies here than fellas, if that means anything to you. So this is primarily the disciplines for the monks. This is going to be important for them because the monks are the ones that will be likely to have others that follow them, that they teach. You think disciple, Christian word, or Jesus as a rabbi pulling his disciples. These are Buddhist rabbis of sort, the monks that want to pull in disciples. And in this particular writing of the three baskets, this is the one that's going to go over all the things. It has things like the food regulations, the sleeping habits, how you ordained. It also includes stories about how the Buddha came up with these rules that they're to live by. And it is thought to be actually the very words of the Buddha, recorded, actually was memorized and first recited at the first Buddhist council by one of the Buddha's direct disciples, whose name was Vinaya Pitaka, hence the Vinaya basket. So this word gets its name from one of the closest followers of Buddha who memorized his teachings and recited it and passed them on. The second basket, the Sutta basket, the basket of lessons. It's the longest of the baskets, the longest of the sacred writings. It has thousands of lessons, quotations, stories, I'm going to say legends of Buddha himself. Some well-known sayings. Have you ever heard of these? These were supposedly well-known sayings. I read of it, like never heard of these. All that we are is the result of what we have thought. Have you heard of that? Supposedly, you've heard that, Miss Patty? I haven't heard that. I mean, something we would say, Your thinking does affect who you are, but there you go. Hatred does not cease by hatred, but only by love. This is an old rule. Maybe you've heard something like that. Those who love nothing and hate nothing have no fetters. That sounds like Buddha, right? I'm not going to love anything. I'm not going to hate anything. I'm going to be unfettered. So this basket is thought to be included, actually, his very first lesson he ever gave. And all of these, the word sutta means lesson itself. And so directly the things that the Buddha taught, quotes of his and that sort of thing. Third basket is the Abhidhamma, the basket of higher doctrine, which doesn't contain any direct teachings of the Buddha, but is the commentary or debates about the Buddha's teaching in the two baskets that we've already said, kind of like when we talked about Judaism. You have the Torah, and then you have all of this other, the Midrash, the Talmud, the discussion of the rabbis down through history of how to interpret and practice the Torah. That's from making a connection. This is sort of that. These are those early on, this isn't like last Thursday they had this discussion, it was written down. This is early followers of Buddha, first several centuries, that had discussions about what he meant and how to actually live like he taught, how to achieve that sort of thing. And so it's that sort of commentary. And these are the writings that they would go by. So you've got the kind of the things of Buddha, and then the discussion of what Buddha said. And you listen to these, and if you're lucky, you too can be enlightened. You seem very excited about the prospect of enlightenment. The moral code. I'm mixing up the order a little bit. I hope you'll bear with me. This is not the same as Hinduism, but this is difficult because, we could talk about like the sacred writings that are kind of like Hinduism. They're not like the Bible or like the Quran or like the Torah. As art is authoritative writings that give specific directions. It's much more kind of nebulous and ethereal. And so the moral code in some ways is a little bit that way too, because there's no deity giving laws that says this is right and this is wrong, but it's a path that you're trying to follow to get to enlightenment, it's often called the middle way, the eightfold path. And so you're trying to receive enlightenment. How do you do that? These are called the sila, and they're all prohibitions. So they're the thou shalt nots. That's all we've got here. If you want to achieve enlightenment, there aren't necessarily things you should do as much as there are things you shouldn't do. So if you like rules, thou shalt nots, we have some for you. First thing, you should never take a life. So we would say, thou shalt not murder. So this extends, by the way, beyond taking of human life. You should never take a life, period, end of sentence, including animal life. As with Hindus, a lot of Buddhists are vegetarian. If you go to a restaurant today and you get a Buddha bowl, it's going to have tofu in it. It's not going to have a meat in it, probably. It's going to be a vegetarian dish, right? You have a Buddha bowl. Caroline loves Buddha bowls. I don't know. Never had a Buddha bowl. So here's a vegetarian. So you never take a life. You don't ever take what is not given. So thou shalt not steal, we would say. No surprise there. Thou shalt not have any sexual misconduct. This is, if you're a monk, this is chastity. So anything sexual is outlawed. If you're a regular old Buddhist, not a monk, then the normal, proper societal norms of marital relations, no adultery, and that sort of thing is what is involved here. False speech, thou shalt not lie, and don't get no intoxicants. I found this picture. I thought they use their hand as a good Buddhist to remind them of the 5 moral principles. No, don't take a life, refrain from stealing, no misuse of senses or sexual misconduct. So that's an interesting So, we talk about sensual things, that's in terms of no long speech, and anything that can cloud the mind is the idea. So certainly Other faiths might use different substances to reach a state of higher consciousness. For the Buddhist, no, nothing that clouds the mind. These 5 are required if you are suggested or expected. I don't know what the right word is for any lay Buddhist, any regular person that wants to be a Buddhist. You should live according to these don'ts. They help along the Eightfold Path. 3 of those are right speech, right action, and right livelihood. And these contribute to that. Now, if you want to go on and be a monk, you got 5 more. So you want to be a regular Buddhist, but remember, only monks can be enlightened. So you'll see how it kind of ratchets up. If you're a monk, you never eat after midday. So we've all sinned tonight. Well, actually, I didn't eat dinner. So, I'm a better Buddhist than you. But I did have a snack this afternoon. Never mind. So you don't eat after midday. So you can see how this is a deprivation that you're going to see over and over in these things. You don't engage in any worldly amusements. So what does that mean? It can mean any number of things. Obviously, when we think about that part of the world, you're probably not thinking movie theaters, arcades, bowling alleys, and the like. It's a little different economy, a little different culture, but nothing of worldly amusements are allowed. You cannot adorn the body or wear perfume. So no jewelry, nothing of that nature. Again, you can see the deprivation idea, or there's a word I'm looking for that I can't quite bring to mind. But this idea of putting all this stuff aside. You can never sleep on a luxurious or a high bed. You sleep on the floor, and it has to be a basic mat. No fancy, sleep number beds or out, whatever it is that you see on TV, those ones that put your feet up, the movable frames, none of that, right? No Tempur-Pedic, therapeutic, nothing. Bad. And of course, lastly, you can't accept any gold or silver. So totally denying anything is this idea. Part of it is if you're trying to achieve enlightenment to reach nirvana, you're getting rid of as many attachments as possible in this world. So you don't want to be dependent on food. You don't want to be kind of wasting your time with amusements. You have more serious business. You don't want to act like the body is important. You want to dress it up or whatever. Everything is these just detaching yourself. Again, what did the Buddha do? Left his family, abandoned them, say, yep, sorry, life is hard, you're on your own. And you can see how part of this goes on. So again, this is
how they support themselves. How do they, if they can't get silver or gold, how do they?
Well, they don't eat either, so what do they need money for? There's not a lot here that they're going to use money for.
And you still have to eat some food, some clothing, and some.
So if you're
place for a man.
If you see, the monks like in Homestead, they're all wearing the same clothes,
right?
Basic clothes.
I've seen pictures of
there are offerings that we'll get into that kind of this ritual acts of offerings that are made and brought to the temples. And so as a, kind of like in the Old Testament, the priest received some of the offerings that were given. And so as a monk living at a temple, as the people come and offer their worship or devotion at the temple, you are benefiting. That's part of what's providing for your livelihood. You're not enriching yourself off of it. You're not gorging yourself, like, ooh, that's my favorite food they brought to this offering. I'm going to eat it all. But it's enough that you can get by. Yes, ma'am.
To that place in Homestead. They had some kind of a thing where they had food for us and everything. And I don't remember a lot about it, except they had one room that you can walk on the floor because that was where the monk or whatever was laying up there, wasn't alive, but it was like thing would look like a monk, and yeah, you didn't, I brought you.
Is that the room?
Kind of looked like it.
You can see the size of this
Yeah.
statue there and all the monks down here. It's a big deal.
And you couldn't walk in that room because it's kind of like sacred ground or something, so. And I started to walk on, and they stopped me and said, oops, walk on there.
Well, to go back to your question, I think it's good if you have monks who don't, slip away from greed or material things. But she is asking, how do they have the building then and the land? And that's.
So they are not personally benefiting from the monies that are made or raised. And I don't know how they raise money, actually. I don't know how. This is a pretty nice facility. I mean, I can't imagine that was cheap.
Yeah.
No.
It's probably a pretty expensive statue. Lots of ornateness there. I don't know actually where. I'll have to look that up and report next week. Where do they get the money for this? I do know people make offerings, and historically, religion has been profitable. I hate to put it that way, but it's true.
Yeah.
I mean, and don't get me wrong. We just got to see some incredible cathedrals in the UK. Just beautiful. I mean, to walk through Westminster Abbey or any of those, St. Paul's Cathedral, or even the ones in the outer cities, Edinburgh or Glasgow or Inverness, these just magnificent. Those aren't cheap. You're walking through there, just the size and the scale and the architecture and maybe we don't think of them as cheap because now they're priceless. What's in there?
Well, the Romans did very well before Christ, and then kept going. So Roman Catholics were plus 3,000 years. Very well. Anyway, it's fine.
Yeah. So lots. I mean, and even again, not casting any negative, but you go up here to St. Justin. It is a beautiful facility. It is gorgeous when you go inside. I'm not one for Jesus hanging on the cross staring down at me the whole time I'm in church, but it is beautiful in there. I mean, there's something about being in those kind of spaces that is, I get it. It does kind of, I don't want to say transport you physically, but takes your mind to another place. It gets your mind off the things, the beauty around you. I mean, to sit in some of the great cathedrals of the world and just look, it's awe-inspiring.
Well, the historical aspect of some of the ones you went to are just in and of itself, the historical aspect, I can't, that's amazing.
Yeah, like who's buried there again?
Yeah.
That's that
I
person.
watched that funeral on TV.
Exactly. It's remarkable. But to my point, which was rather cynical, religion has always been profitable. It's very true. I think part of it is the human awareness of our own guilt and the desire of humanity, even before there was money, to somehow appease the gods. And if what we have is this child to throw in the volcano or this whatever, or in this case, this cash to throw, we do it because, and on the other side of that, religious leaders have been incredibly good at using guilt and other ways to manipulate people into giving toward those things. Should you give? Yes. Do we encourage you to give? Absolutely. I think that generosity should mark us as Christians. But sometimes you look and you go, maybe the generosity at times is profiting the wrong places, But that's another story for another day. Any other questions? I know we kind of changed. Yes, ma'am.
Is there a tithing system attached to it?
I don't know. I have to check into that. And with that idea of how the monks are supported and how these temples are built, when you go to ritual acts that involve offerings and gifts. So puja we looked at in Hinduism, that was one of their ritual acts. That means worship this means worship. The other word was devotion. So There are ceremonies at these temples where you bring offerings, you bring gifts. So part of it, you might see things you can't see in this particular. I don't know, in a Hindu temple, there would be offerings and gifts laid right around the gods up at the front. I don't know, if you say you can't even go into this room,
I wasn't supposed to.
but maybe because you're not Hindu or because you're not a monk or who knows what. So they do these ritual acts, these acts of puja or worship, these offerings and gifts. These are some of the things that they will do. They're going to have their mantra and they're going to chant. Very similar, again, a lot of similarity to, excuse me, Hinduism, I think, because culturally, these two are closely related. You travel to that part of the world, which I've never done, India, Nepal, Tibet, you've got some similarities there. You look at, even if we went back to that map, you can see where the different strains of Buddhism went. There's some commonalities. What's over here in China is different than what's in Tibet, because those are a little bit different cultures. What's in Japan is a different strain of Buddhism, because Japanese culture is a little different than Chinese culture. But overall, we have a lot of similarities. So mantras, chanting. By the way, this idea of puja can be done at the temple, but it's not necessarily done there. There's not a regular schedule of services like we would think of, like you go to temple on this day. Most Buddhists have a personal shrine in their home of some sort that they would also practice these things on a regular basis, in addition to from time to time going to do these at the temple. Mala, these are the Buddhist rosary, basically. It's a string of beads that they use. And with the beads, it helps them focus. This is like their, what do they call those things? Fidget spinners. This is their fidget spinner for the Buddhists. It's meant to calm the mind. It's not like the rosary, like each bead is a prayer, but it is a calming thing. I know many people I'm related to. My daughter has on her keychain or on her neck chain for school a little fidget thing that has bubble pops, so she can if she's teaching, she'll be popping bubbles because sometimes calms her down. This is the idea here. Of course, you would think meditation. When you think Buddhism, you think Zen Buddhism, which is Zen and all that sort of thing. Zen gardens that you can see all around. They often bow as a sign of respect, but also if you go and worship, you would see them repeatedly bowing before the altar. And the last thing on here is offering. So there we go. It's not necessarily money. It can be flowers. It can be but it can be candles. It can be any number of things. But all of these offerings, particularly like flowers and candles, they don't last. Flowers fade, candles burn out. And it's a reminder, these offerings to them are all a reminder of the impermanence of things. So let's connect that, now that I'm thinking, to money. If the teaching is material things are impermanent and you don't hold on to them, well, you can certainly see how offerings of money would be a way to offer your understanding of the impermanence of things, that this isn't important, this isn't what's permanent, so I give it up. That's just me thinking. And so these are the acts that help them become more deeply devoted in their faith and open themselves to this idea that one day they too might be enlightened. In these ritual acts and in their process of enlightenment, it's that karma, it's that reincarnation cycle. This is undergirding all of that. Not a caste system, although the monks do hold a special place. So all of this thing, somehow detaching from the material, understanding the impermanence of the material, is bringing you closer to the eternal, the nirvana of the universe and what's out there, and allowing you somehow to get closer and closer and closer to freeing your mind and reaching nirvana. Questions, comments? You know,
I'm not accountable to any of these rules. Is there any accountability?
that's where the karma and reincarnation come in. So as far as would they practice Buddhist church discipline? No. That if you do these things, you will be rewarded in the next life.
Okay.
If you don't do these things, that's the purpose of karma. You will be punished. You will come back and have to pay that. And that one of the differences between Buddhist idea of reincarnation and access to nirvana is if you're really good, you can do this all in one life. Or if you're really, really good, in one meditation session. So Hinduism is expected you're going to be over and over and over, but Buddhism gives you a little hope. Like if you really, really, really are good, one lifetime is all it takes to reach nirvana. I guess, but that's assuming in some versions that you're a monk. Or if you have a really, spiritual experience under the Bodhi tree, like the original guy, you get there. So as far as accountability, like you didn't give enough. I've been to churches where you get it. These were not Christian churches. With a friend when I was younger, there was a Jewish temple, high holy days, and there was a list at the door and a table, accountability, like you haven't given what you are supposed to give. So if you want to come in for Passover, you will pay up and then we'll let you in.
Yeah, I know Jews do that for the high holiday.
But nothing like that is going to exist here. If you go to the temple and give an offering, they're probably not even keeping record. They might, because they probably have tax forms to file or however that works. I know religious taxes are different than personal taxes or business taxes, but.
So is enlightenment and nirvana the same thing?
Yeah, nirvana is their goal. When they escape their all attachment to this material world and are fully enlightened, they become a Buddha themselves, not like the Buddha, but
Right.
They've reached Buddha and become an enlightened. And that cycle is broken. I say one with the universe, that's not the right way to put it.
Right.
It's not one with the universe, but they've reached total enlightenment.
Are there more than one Buddhas?
Are there more than one Buddha?
Like I've heard that, when Nepal fell, now there's certain Buddhas in different parts of the world are reincarnated,
Yes.
So is there one per country? How does that work?
So in Tibetan Buddhism, it's the Dalai Lama.
Right.
He would be the highest
Right.
guy. And it is thought that when he dies, there's a great search to find the next Dalai Lama.
Okay.
And I believe it's the one that's the Dalai Lama now. They took to him the possessions. It was
Right.
like it was a child, a toddler, or a young child, and they took him a bunch of possessions, and he only picked the ones that belonged to the former Dalai Lama. And they said, "You are the right guy." And at a young age, he becomes the Dalai Lama. In other strains, not Tibetan, but the other strains, yes, they believe the Buddha is reincarnated. Theravada, not so much. Theravada Buddhism is there was one Buddha, and we're trying to get there, and the monks are the way. What was the second one? Not the Tibetan, not the Theravada, that would be Mahayana Buddhism, does believe that the Buddha is constantly being incarnated. And that's the body, that long word. Body, what? Yeah, that thing. What you said.
So is that what the monks are trying to attain besides enlightenment is coming back or?
That would be a pretty cool thing because they think, because that word, that body.
And then that would make it like
you've reached enlightenment, but we choose not to enter enlightenment. You choose to stay behind as a mortal to help other people along the path. So, but there is also that, whether there's one of those or multiple of those, there is also thought there's a reincarnation of the Buddha somewhere along the way. I must confess, I thought this was going to take longer, so that's the end.
Now, I have a few more things. I'm reading about the Vahapad chakra. And that is, they believe that humans and animals live in separate realms, and that humans can experience heaven when they're happy, or lower states when they're hateful, greedy, or pain.
Okay,
And they have this, the karma, they believe is, that the law of cause and effect determines a person's role in his life.
karma is definitely huge, cause and effect. Reap what you sow goes by different names, different terms, and different faiths, but that is very much a part of the Buddhist faith. Yes, that was on that slide. Sorry, I should have. We have the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Paths to look forward to. We get the world view next week. And then we'll talk more about nirvana. I'll look up some things about money to give you more an idea on that. Any other questions? Any other homework for me?
This was great.
Okay, then. Sorry, I guess. Oh, I see Joel and Ann online. Joel, have any questions?
No questions.
Nope, thanks.
You sent me an email saying you have a temple near your place because you're in the Research Triangle area.
Not Buddhist, it's Bahia.
Oh, Baha'i, okay.
And then we also have a Hindu. Oh, no, it's Hare Krishna.
The Krishna compound.
Yeah.
Good times.
Yeah.
Very diverse community.
Well, with the three universities there and who that attracts and what that attracts to an area, of course.
Yeah. I bet there's a Buddhist temple around here somewhere.
Just look hard enough. What'd you say, Miss
Take
Peggy?
us on field trips to all these places as we study.
We could try. We want to make an appointment to go visit the Buddhist place and
I still want to do it. Did you?
I've never been, no. And it's not that far away. So who knows? Field trip! That might be interesting. How many would be up for that?
I can go around my work.
I don't know. I don't know their hours, if they're open in the evenings. So
Yeah.
anybody have to be in the evenings?
Might be some afternoons.
I'll look into that. That would be interesting.
I kind of like to see the Jewish temple in town here. I'm not gonna lie, I've always wondered, I drive by and I'm like,
It's
I kind of want to go in and.
so you can go in when they have their services. They're
Friday nights.
Friday nights.
Yeah.
I went in for a couple things. They're very, very kind, welcoming.
Yeah,
Very traditional.
very traditional.
Oh, I couldn't stand it.
Oh, wow.
So boring. So you can't understand anything.
So my favorite part is their Torah scroll
Right.
because it's a Holocaust scroll that was rescued out of the Holocaust. It's on loan to them. And I was there for something and he said, if anybody wants to come see the scroll, I'm like, that's me. It's just incredible.
I take a field trip there too.
I'll look
But the
into
temple itself is a very plain building.
Yeah.
I had
it is.
a Jewish roommate that she invited me for the birthday, you know.
It's a very simple building, very simple. The auditorium looks a lot like our fellowship hall with chairs around, a little elevated stage, got the ark for the Torah. The service can be tedious, especially when it's in Hebrew. and you get the prayer book that you're reading from, or you hear it's all in Hebrew, and you're like, oh, okay, here we go. But yeah, it's worth going to. It is a very nice experience. There's usually snacks afterwards.
Unlike the Baptist who does the snacks before.
Yes.
That's good.
Hey, gotta eat.
Sorry.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody. I'll work on field trips. I'll look up. I'll do that. That was.
Do you have
Good
a
idea.
lot of Buddhist people who come here too, or not?
Not that I know of. I think as far as, committed Buddhist people I'm sure there are people in the Keys that lean toward Eastern religions, whether it's some form of Buddhism, Hinduism, or New Age. All of these ideas kind of overlap. But as far as a formal, I am a Buddhist and practicing in any way like this. I don't know of any that I've ever met down here. Love it. Well, our time's up, folks. The cuckoo clock has gone off. I'm going to pray and we will call it a night. I love it. I need to get one of those. Father in heaven, we thank you for your love and grace to us. We thank you for how you have revealed yourself fully and finally through the gift of your son, Jesus. We thank you for the hope that we have in him, the promise of forgiveness and eternity. Lord, thank you for out of your kindness and out of your patience, calling us to yourself, redeeming us, adopting us as your children. Lord, help us to never take that for granted, especially as we look at those of other faiths and think about just what it means to know the one true God and how that is only because of your grace. Never let us lose sight of that great blessing. Bless us as we leave this place tonight, Father, going into the rest of our week. And we look forward to gathering together as your people again to worship you and asking all of this in Jesus' name. Amen.